Hello everybody, good afternoon. So I'm Timo Rui from North Karelia, Finland, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this second Northern Periphery Distinct Project Tuesday event. And today we are going to hear and see three fine presentations of disruptive technology in the social and healthcare. And after those presentations, we have opportunity to discuss this issue. And I remind you that also during the presentation, you feel free to include your questions in the chat. And they can relate those presentations, but also disruptive technologies in social and healthcare in common. But our schedule today is that first presentation comes from Ireland, from Weisar Institute by Mr. Stephen Seafried, IoT applications in health and social care. And after Ireland, we go to Sweden. Our second presentation came from Umeå University by Associate Professor Anders Lundström, using 360-degree videos for virtual reality exposure in CBT. And after these two presentations, we will probably have a short break, maybe, until our last presenter arrives. And when he comes to Zoom, we will hear presentation from Finland by Gili company by Mr. Samuel Kivikari. Artificial intelligence usage in early detection and providing preventive care in home care and nursing homes. And after also that presentation, we will have some time to discuss. For my part, I hope that you enjoy this Tuesday event and get new information and also ideas about disruptive technologies. But I think you are not here to hear my voices and for my blue eyes. So Mr. Stephen Seafried, the Distinct channel is yours. Please.
Thank you very much for your introduction. I'll just try and share my screen. Try and share the right thing. There we go. I trust you can see that.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. My name is Stephen Seawright from the Wireless Sensor Applied Research Centre in Letterkenny, County Donegal in Ireland. We're very much an applied research centre in that our core funding comes from an Irish government body called Enterprise Ireland. So our mandate and our principal work is to support Irish industry with technology. So we often work with companies, and those companies can be established companies or new startups, or indeed sometimes spin-out companies from our institute. Our group, WISAR, stands for Wireless Sensor Applied Research, as I said. So we are primarily an Internet of Things group. We're not really sector specific. We have a lot of different projects. As I say, because we're driven by industry need, that can be in different areas. But we have a number of projects, which I'll explain today, that have been in healthcare. Many of you will be familiar with this type of diagram, but I'll just quickly explain it. If you're from a software background, you're probably familiar with everything has to be in layers, and layers of 7 is a typical number. So I think it was Cisco came up with this diagram, of applying 7 layers to the Internet of Things. Our group really starts at the bottom layer there. We're a physical device research group where we make sensors out of electronics. Often they're bespoke, not always, but it means also we have a good handle, a good knowledge on the connectivity part in layer 2, how to get the data from the sensor to typically the cloud, but it can be a bit of edge computing on level 3, where you might have some intelligence built into the device, or indeed a computer in the environment where you're picking up the data, so that you can compress the data somewhat before being sent on. As you're probably aware, a lot of sensors are battery powered, and therefore many IoT networks, in many IoT networks, the challenge is to extend the life of the sensor by having very low power consumption. And that often comes down to being smart about how the data is sent and being restrictive on how much data that you would send. So layer 4 is where we collect the data, we store it, usually in a database, often these days on the cloud, but it can be also remotely on the product. The 5th layer is where we sort it out. We abstract it before we do some data processing on it, maybe in an application, some analytics, data visualization, dashboards, machine learning in some cases, applying AI, etc., up at level 7. So that's all. That's the most technical side I've got. The rest is just a few examples, but I think it's just important to put things into context. So this morning, well, where I am, it's still morning. Could be afternoon in Finland. I just want to mention some projects we've done about wearable IoT in healthcare. So what I mean by that is where we are attaching a sensor or a monitoring device to the body, for example, to capture, sorry, I can't see a little diagram to my right, but oh, there we go. For example, to monitor vital signs, skin temperature, bioimpedance, orientation. A lot of devices these days are using gyroscopes to measure movement or steps. And the thing about wearable sensors is more and more, as people, for example, have Fitbits or Apple Watches, they'll have apps on their body where they can quantify their own health. So we call that quantified self. But from a clinician point of view, getting data from sensors, whether it's from a Fitbit watch or from bespoke sensor or any of the examples that shown there on the right. The most important aspect of that is that the data is objective. It's not reliant on a patient's mood coming in for a checkup once or twice a year or once a month or something like that. You can get a deeper insight into the condition of the patient. So it doesn't rely on the patient recall or subjective information, for example, the patient filling in questionnaires. So the first, I have 3 examples. The first example is what we call internally a data glove. It's used to measure and record movement in rheumatoid arthritic patients. The benefit of this approach is to replace manual goniometer measurements and Kapanji questionnaires. So traditionally, a patient is brought into a surgery and they're asked to show how much they can move their fingers. This is measured with a small angular type device that hasn't changed in decades called a goniometer. And then they're asked to fill in a questionnaire to determine the extent of their condition. So the solution that's been implemented in this glove is to fit sensors inside the glove so that we can measure the small movements in each finger and on the thumb. So the diagram illustrates the use of bend sensors, for example, in red. But we also have another solution that uses IMU sensors. That means accelerometers and gyroscopes on the finger as well. In each case, the data is streamed via Bluetooth to a mobile phone. And then clinicians can use the data to view regular data on joint movement to assess the changes. This is how it looks. The photograph shows the glove, it shows the app. And in this case, you can see the bend sensors that are fitted into each finger. The procedure for the patient is to initiate the Bluetooth app by pressing the big button. And step by step, then the app goes through an automatic calibration routine where the patient has to follow the instructions on the screen, moving fingers, etc. Raw data is streamed to the phone, where we do a little bit of processing to cut down on the data that has to be transmitted. So, for example, calculation of angles and range of movement. The data is then recorded and synced to the cloud. So there is a possibility of extracting the information later if there isn't a connection to the cloud at that particular time. So the project is currently undergoing preclinical trials. At the very top of the slide, you can see the name ActionSense. So that's a startup company that's running with this technology. On the bottom diagram or photograph on the right is a photograph of the control unit that we developed. And in fact, in the current version, the battery's on the back of that unit. It's approximately 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters square. And it fits into this. You can see a small bulge at the hand here. It fits there. Second example is a project that we have been working with for companies that produce wheelchair cushions and wheelchairs, both for the adult market and for the children market. So in this case, the objective is to measure and record pressure on a wheelchair seat cushion. The benefit is that it assists in the prevention of patient sores. So you can imagine if you're paralyzed, you may not know that you need to move, or the carer who looking after a patient in a residential home, for example, may also not know that that's necessary. So, however, the challenge was to develop an affordable pressure cover for the cushion. There are very, very expensive cushions available, costing hundreds of euros. So we wanted to develop a fabric-based one that is relatively cheap. So the solution is 3 layers of fabric used to create a sensor grid. In the example we have developed, it's 30 by 30 sensors, so that 900 sensing points. If you look at the top diagram, you can see the concept. What we have are 2 external layers consisting of conductive strips. In the bottom layer, they're horizontal. On the top layer, they're vertical strips. And in between that, we have an internal resistive material layer. So when pressure is applied to the fabric, the resistive layer bends. We get a change in resistance, and that is then recorded back to connectors or wires to the on one side of the fabric. On the bottom diagram or photograph, you can see the top layer pulled back and the resistive layer underneath. And on the left-hand side, you can see some of the wires coming out and going into a ribbon cable at the bottom. So the signals are taken out on on 2 sides, a horizontal and a vertical side in this diagram. So data is collected in a data acquisition unit that's fitted to the wheelchair. We use a proprietary wireless standard to transmit it down at in the ISM band at 868 megahertz, and that's simply to give a good range so that it can be in a hospital environment or in a care home environment and still be picked up. Data is transmitted to the cloud or a PC. We then analyze it or do some manipulation on the data to present the data in the form of a pressure heat map, which you can see at the bottom. So it's not, the idea is not to have an accurate value of pressure. You would need to use one of the more sophisticated and expensive pressure maps if you wanted that. But what it does give is an indication of where the pressure is. And of course, also it gives us information on how long the person has been seated in that position. So the applications we've seen so far are occupational therapists who use the system to optimize the cushion design and the cushion setup when it's being fitted for the wheelchair. And we've also are seeing some trials at the moment in a social care environment to alert carers of patients that people need to be moved or lifted because they've been in the same spot for some time. The two companies we're working with are both really focused on wheelchairs, but I suspect there is an application for this in a care home, for example, with dementia or Alzheimer's patients who maybe aren't particularly mobile and rely on other people to help them move and get about. The last example is a research project using exoskeletons for rehabilitation. Often the case is after someone has had a stroke or has suffered a spinal cord injury, there's neurological impairments that mean that they can't walk. So for example, I believe it's about 60% of spinal cord injuries lead to paralysis below the waist. And there is hope in those situations to bring back some level of movement by using these exoskeletons. Beyond that, the physical benefits include improvement in mood, sleep quality, self-confidence, reduction in stress. The psychological benefits, the ability to stand upright, engage with other people at an eye level, rather than from a seated position. So the challenge is the assessment of the improvement is limited. Really, today it relies on counting the number of steps or the step endurance, how far a patient can walk on a treadmill or in other types of apparatus to see if the physiotherapy is taking shape. But using the exoskeleton and sensors, which I'll just explain, we're able to get more objective data and understand the improvement then better. So the project was with a local charity in Letterkenny, and we also worked with our sports science department in Letterkenny IT. The PI on this project is Dr. James Connolly, and most of his research is in the area of wearable technology for healthcare. So the objective was to quantify the effectiveness of lower limb powered exoskeleton. We're measuring the metabolic energy expenditure, also muscular contraction and activity in the legs, the angular movement of the lower limbs, and the idea is to understand the quality of life within neurological rehabilitation. So the solution was in 3 parts. We have the exoskeleton, that's the model number there. I'm afraid I don't recall the company's name, but that's the model number, Exco GT. The patient is also asked to wear a Gabb's horn power cube. This is to measure the breath volume under load, so how much oxygen is brought into the body and the CO2 omitted. And that is used as an indication of the metabolic expenditure during the exercise. And thirdly, EMG sensors are attached to the leg. Small photograph at the bottom of the slide there shows that, using an off-the-shelf data logging unit from a company called Shimmer, who was part of the project there. They're based in Dublin, Ireland. So the EMG sensors records the muscle electrical activity coming from the calf. So as I said, the study was conducted with No Barriers Rehabilitation Charity in conjunction with Letterkenny University Hospital. So what we mean here is that stroke patients are discharged from the hospital and the charity then gets involved to help with their rehabilitation. Energy expenditure data was captured using the gas horn power cube during walking bouts and reference to a control group that didn't require the exoskeleton. So studies were made with, for want of a better word, healthy individuals, people who weren't paralyzed. So there was a control group. The breathing data is used for cardiopulmonary diagnostics with the charity and with the hospital. The Shimmer 3 EMG sensors with an inbuilt inertial measurement units are used to assess the muscle contraction and the angular movement of the lower limbs during each walking bout. And what we can observe is the increase in energy activity and capacity quantified after multiple sessions. All of this type of use of exoskeletons is generally, if a patient is at the point where they can use the apparatus and they can walk, for example, on a treadmill or even just walking on a floor. An objective often is to improve the gait of the patient so that they can stand as upright as possible. So the inertial measurement units there are important in that they can assess that angular movement and also the orientation of the individual as they are standing and walking with the exoskeleton. That's me. As I said, the target of the presentation was 15 minutes. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them, or whatever way we want to proceed.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. It was very nice to hear what a great job you do in Weisser Institute. Also, I have visited you a couple of times.
Okay.
But there is 2 questions in chat. Can you see those questions, or should I read them?
I'll have a look. So
Quite long question. It's better than if you read.
Yes, I'll read it. Ulf has asked, what are the main challenges when IoT is implemented in real situation with users? Is it connected to make accurate measurements of sensor data, or is it in the communication of sensor data to the server computer that a challenge is in Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connections? So I think one of the biggest challenges is actually often the amount of data, and being able to do some analysis or calculations on that data at an early stage as possible is often the strategy that we try to do. So if we're using a mobile phone, that's obviously in the phone. If we're using a type of a single board computer, which is part of the device, is in that. And in our case, because we are a team of embedded systems and firmware engineers, we would try to do as many calculations in the firmware as possible to cut that down. On a practical basis, yes, especially working with elderly patients, there can be difficulties in getting the patient to use the phone or the app correctly. So we are relying on a bit of training and repetitive use to get them up to speed. If I take the glove, for example, one of the things we're doing at the moment is looking if we can build an SD card into the glove as an option, so that the data is just stored, and then when they go back to meet their doctor or their clinician, we just download the data. And that has been driven mainly by just the difficulty in getting elderly patients to use the app correctly. So more generally, when it comes to IoT, if it's a sensor device that's battery powered, really, and maybe this is a step away from healthcare, but might be important for social care. We have to pick wireless networks that are designed for data and designed to send small amounts of data less frequently. So, for example, we have a project at the moment which is aimed at assisted living for people, elderly people at home. And in fact, we're using Sigfox to send data once an hour from devices in the home. And the drivers in that project really were just the sensors. Each sensor could be set up independently at home, not relying on a hub or anything, but they just fire out their data independently of the user. Very easy to set up and don't require electricity in the home. They don't require a Wi-Fi network in the home. So it was really an independent, low power network. So maybe that answers that question, I hope.
And there is from Anders and Rika also.
Yeah. So yes, Anders, out of curiosity, what can you say about the durability and repairability of the fabric parts of the pressure monitor? Yes, we're just working through that at the moment, although we have been careful to pick fabrics, commercially available fabrics that can be washed and can go into a washing machine. But we're now at the point of integrating it into connectors. So the early stage connectors are push button type connectors, the type of thing that you might have on a young baby where you are connecting around the diaper. So we still have to see how durable that is yet. And Rika, how do the users of the sensors feel about using the sensors? Does it take long for the user to get accustomed to the devices? In the exoskeleton case, no, they're very, very enthusiastic to use the sensors. They want to know as much about their improvement as possible. Also, in the case of the glove, it's worked well, I would say, in a clinical environment where they're called in and an assessment has happened. It's worked less well in a domestic environment where, you know, problems with the app have caused intermittent use, but we're confident working through that will improve. Yeah. And then lastly, Margaret has a question. Are any of the three examples, for example, seat cushion, looking at using machine learning to make decisions, alerting actions? Yes, that is definitely a possibility. Of course, with machine learning, you need to have a significant amount of data. And in this case, you need to have the data on that particular patient and in that particular environment. So for example, using the pressure mat in a care home environment that I mentioned there does require the data to be reasonably well established about that patient before people can make decisions. Again, another project that we did was aimed at having an alert system in a hospital environment. And that was simply to know if someone has left their bed or not. So it comes down to what the alert or action is. It can be as simple as knowing that they're present or not. And obviously machine learning is needed for more sophisticated alerts. But in principle, yes, definitely can be used.
Okay. But once more time, thank you, Stephen.
Not at all. Thank you.
And thanks all for your questions. I think it's time to hear and see something about 360-degree videos. Anders,
all right.
Vasaku, the channel is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm just gonna get the presentation going. So hello everyone, I'm Anders Lundström. I'm associate professor at Umeå University. I have to say that much of this work I started when I was working at the KTH Royal Institute of Technology, and I started after New Year's Eve here in Umeå. So I'm very curious about this northern contexts and how these technologies can help us out here. I'm going to actually talk about two works that I've been working on, and one is using 360 video for VR exposure in cognitive behavior therapy for panic disorder with agoraphobia. And the other is we've also looked into how we can use 360 video in nursing home to create social experience and increase the well-being. I included this late when I saw the title of the events, and I wanna close this talk with just some open opportunities around 360 videos. So first, what is 360 film? It's the films that you can see in virtual reality headsets. Usually it's very immersive. It feels as if you're in the real environment when you wear these glasses, and they are recorded using 360 cameras. Here you can see a picture where from the subway scene, where you can look around in all different directions. And one difference to regular TV is that you cannot see everything at the same time. You can only see in the direction you're looking at. Some benefits of this medium that we took as a starting point here is that producing 360 videos is quite easy these days, and the equipment is quite cheap, and the production costs are quite low, in particular if we compare to the costs involved in developing virtual environments using computer graphics. That costs lots of money, and then even more if you wanted to look some sort of semi-realistic. It's also great to capture real environments. We don't need to model everything. We get lots of free, all these details that the real world provides. So very interesting new medium. I think we've done way too little, explored way too little what we can use this for. So let's go into the first paper. In this paper, we've been working with psychologists and filmmakers and looked into how 360 videos can be used within CBT treatment, and in particular in so-called exposure therapy. This is therapy sessions where patients meet their fears in a systematic and controlled ways in real environments. It's called in vivo exposure. One problem with in vivo exposure is that it's extremely resource intensive. Therapists need to leave the clinic, and it takes considerable time and planning to conduct exposure therapy, which means that it's not used to the extent that we could. And it's often also not an accessibility issue that we don't offer this kind of treatment to all patient groups because it's not economically viable. So the question was that, can we replace this in vivo exposure with 360 films, and in that way create more effective healthcare through reduced time and costs, and also increase accessibility, and also treatment opportunities for groups that rarely get treatment at all. It may be because of the condition they have, or because of geographical issues. You're not living close to a facility that offers this kind of treatment. We've done a clinical study on agoraphobia, which is the fear of panic attacks and bodily sensations in public or isolated, often in crowded environments. In the patient group we met, it had a lot to do with public transport, buses and subways. We treated 12 patients within a standard CBT protocol, where we replaced all in vivo exposure with 360 films. And we measured before, during, and directly after, as well as 6 and 12 months after completion of the treatment. And this was within a 12-week CBT treatment program. And this is actually one of our patients talking in the media, because she was so excited. She had been away from the subway for 23 years and was finally out again riding the subway. And she was extremely enthusiastic about these things and being a part of this study. And overall, our results show that this form of exposure therapy works very well. We had significant improvements on most important measures, and it looks like it has an equivalent effect as regular in vivo exposure have the number compares very well to larger studies within psychology. The patients' responses were also very positive. They liked it, and one big thing for many patients was that they considered it as a plus that it was virtual reality exposure in the way that it was a natural in-step to the real environments. Many of the patients have been away from these environments for such a long time, and that it felt it felt too much to go straight to them. So they appreciated to go into virtual reality first and get accustomed to these environments before going out in the real environments. And all our patients responded well to the treatment, and all are out there riding subways and buses and all that, and all the problems that they had. And so we also looked at how it was implemented into primary care, because the study was taking place in a healthcare facility, in a real facility, not a research lab. And from this point of view, it looked it seems affordable. It seems easy to implement and use. We've installed it in real environments. They've operated it completely independently without our interventions or support at all. It's also very easy to add new films compared to the computer graphics, and the professions themselves can actually record and add films to extend or add treatments for new patients. And the healthcare facility has also kept the prototype and continues to use it. So this looks like, even though it's VR is quite disruptive technology, it looks ready to be used already today, which I find very interesting, because there's been a lot of things going on within VR research related to psychological treatment, and we see very little of it in clinical practice today. But this seems ready already as it is. The second paper I want to talk about is called Co-watching 360 films in nursing homes. The purpose of this study was to study the experiences and practical aspects of having residents at nursing homes look together on 360 films in groups. So it's a sort of a social event. They see the same films synchronized at the same time. And we wanted to look into the feasibility of using 360 videos in this context, and how the residents experience this co-watching experience using 360 films. But of course, the overall aim was to improve well-being through new and interesting experiences for these people. The method here was we were using non-participant observation. So the nurses ran the sessions, and we observed and recorded these sessions and looked at how things were unfolding and what was happening and what problems and issues and what people were saying. And during the sessions, they looked at a number of 360 films from the local area. And these films were made by filmmakers from Film Stockholm. It included boat trips in the archipelago and lemurs at Skansen, canoe rides and the guided tours at the fortress, an art exhibition and or walk. After the intervention, we had interviews with the residents in groups. We also had group discussions and service with the nurses and the heads of divisions. We also interviewed a film consular and a playmaker who had the experience from using 360 video with the elderly before. And this is how it typically looked like in these contexts. We see different groups of residents looking together. Some are in wheelchairs, some are a bit older, some are a bit younger, but everyone have reasons to be in these nursing homes. And you can see them pointing and talking. Here I have a short clip of two old fishermen who were going on a boat ride in the archipelago, and they were talking about old memories and experiences and things that happened previously in their lives. Of course, this pointing was a big problem because there was lots of the residents who were pointing, oh, look at that, but no one else in the session could actually see what they were looking at. So there's some work to do to make this even better, I think. So the results, they was experienced very positively by the residents, and from this perspective, at least some kind of short-term well-being was achieved through new experiences and the conversations that emerged post the sessions. The nurses noticed excitement among the residents, and perhaps more interestingly, they noticed spontaneous movements also among residents who were otherwise quite immobile and didn't move much at all. They also noted a general pride in being able to try new technology. And I think this is very interesting because this group actually said that they've been living with technology and the advancements of technology through their whole life, and they're not afraid to try new things. They've tried a lot during their lifetime, but lately now ending up at a nursing home, trying new things and catching up with the latest is much more difficult. And they also said that it was so fun to actually try these things that they've heard about on the news and made them feel so relevant. Perhaps even more interesting is that the intervention established a self-going practice in these nursing homes that we were working at. And post the study, they purchased their own equipment and they continued on their own. When we did the study, it was 19 residents involved, but last time I checked, which was some time ago, they've been running sessions with hundreds of residents, and it's spread to other nursing homes, both within the municipality, but also to other municipalities close by. And they say themselves that it's so cheap with this headset, so the cost benefit is in favor of using this technology from their perspective. But there was also lots of problems, of course, with HMD weight and visual problems, because headsets are quite front heavy, and many of the residents struggled holding the headsets up, or not many, some of them struggled with holding this. So I think we need more adjustable and balanced HMDs to work better in this context. Otherwise, we risk social isolation for individuals. One workaround was to actually hold the head up during these sessions. The co-watching benefits was not immediately observable during the sessions, although we could see this value emerging post the sessions. And we think it was because it has a limited virtual cortex. The thing I just said, that they couldn't point, they couldn't have this sort of shared conversation, look at that and talk about these things, which was a struggle. But the big thing is that the media and the content itself created value. It prompted memories and discussions, but the residents also asked for new places that may be otherwise out of reach for them. So one example was an elderly gentleman who said that his wife was from the Swedish mountains, and he had never been there in his lifetime, and now being at a nursing home, he realized sort of I would never be able to go there. But then he realized that this medium could possibly provide him with an opportunity to visit it virtually and see these places and those things. And I think that's very interesting and quite difficult, perhaps for us young and healthy, to imagine the value that this can bring, and being able to move people through time and space and see different places. So finally, I think it's very interesting now that I've started here in Umeå University to think about what are the specific uses for 360 film in the northern region and transfer some of this knowledge to this region. Particularly, I find it interesting to look at distance treatment and accessibility issues. I'm located in Västerbotten, and it's a huge area and not very high population density. So what kind of treatments and things could be is interesting within this region, but also for training and education. Another part I find very interesting to see if there's any interest in this, because 360 videos is sort of known for being able to raise empathy among the viewers for various issues. There's one of these classical films from a refugee camp, which is very strong to watch. You get the immediate feeling, a very strong feeling for the conditions through this medium, much stronger than TV. And I noticed the priority axis of the distinct network was using innovation to maintain and develop robust and competitive communities and protecting, promoting, and developing cultural and natural heritage, which I also find interesting to discuss how 360 film can facilitate these things. So I stop there.
Tack så mycket, Anders. I have to say that when you write that uses us in the northern region, I'm quite sure that our University of Applied Science is always ready to cooperation with you, because we have teaching in social and healthcare and also teaching in media. So it's excellent in our curriculum when it comes to our curriculum. But there is 2 questions, actually now 3 questions. First, Riikka asks something about duration of your results.
All right, let me see. Do you think in vivo and 360 exposure treatment is a long-term treatment method for phobias, or do you have any hypothesis on how long the exposure allows the patient to cope with the phobias? Basically, is it an easy long-term fix, or do you think patients will need to continue therapy to maintain the results? Well, from our results in our study, in the follow-ups, it looked very, very good and promising. Of course, phobias are complex, and if you take agoraphobia, that's in Swedish it's called differential diagnosis. Perhaps it's a bad translation, but it includes many different things. So there's a phobia for specific environments, but there's also panic syndrome involved, and the social phobia. So there's several different components feeding into this phobia. And of course, there's these mechanisms, thought mechanisms and spirals that potentially could go backwards over time. So there's never any guarantee, but it looks very promising, and probably compares. It looks like it compares very well to regular in vivo exposure, which is considered to be the most efficient treatment method for phobias around. So I think it's quite long term, but of course, things could happen for certain individuals. All right, next question. Is there any plan for the 360 exposure to be adopted as a solution in primary care? If not, what do you think are the main challenges to be adopted and implemented by the therapists? Well, I can say that we're a group who is working on building a 360 platform targeted to healthcare usage of healthcare, a 360 video within healthcare. So there's the plan. because we think this can be used in a multitude of different things. I know that doctors in USA have experimented with preparing children for anesthesia using 360 films, and it seems to work very well. I think what's needed is a platform that can manage large amounts of film and also package film into different packages that contains relevant films for different treatments, and also helps synchronize films with the headsets and all these things. So and there isn't really a good option on the market today for these things, and also for all the needs, the specifics of the needs within a healthcare setting. So we're trying to move forward, but I've heard about some newer startups that are also exploring 360 films, so we will see what happens in the future. Okay, Margaret, inspiring examples, both on IT sensors and 360 films with tremendous potential. I have to leave. Okay, that was not a question. All right, that was it. Or Elina.
Sorry, unmute myself. Okay, thank you one more time, Anders. Now I think we should have a 5-minute breaks. We have to wait a couple of minutes. Samuel, he just sent an email. He asked the address of this meeting. Maybe he will join quite soon, but should we come back 3:05 at Finnish time and 5:10?
10 minutes, Timo. Let's take 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will put a timer there so people can see.
All right.
Where you have to go, when you have to come back.
All right. Okay. See you after 10 minutes.
See you soon.
Okay, the artificial intelligence, and Samuel, the Zoom is yours. Please.
Thank you, Timo. So today I'm going to share my screen quite soon to you all. So I'm going to discuss about AI usage in early detection and providing this preventive information for care homes and home care sector. And I'm Samuel Kivikari, and I'm responsible of our sales and partnerships here at Gili. And we are a Finnish company, and we have started our journey estimately 5 years ago or so. And we started as an IoT platform, since Finnish municipalities had this issue of having different kind of IoT device vendors collecting the data in their own cloud solutions. And they had difficulties to use the data because it was so fragmented. And we provided this IoT platform for them to get this device data in one place. And after that, we have come a little bit further. So there are these ERP solutions used in the field of home care, when the home care employee visits the home care customer, helps him or her out of the bed, and they make porridge, and probably they go to the bathroom together, etc. And all of these visits are documented in these electronic health record solutions or ERP software solutions. And what we have brought to our customers is this AI platform. Earlier I mentioned IoT platform, but the thing is that nowadays we analyze data which comes from these care software solutions. It analyzes this completely free-form text with our NLP, and you're also able to connect these home care devices, IoT devices, to our platform, and our AI analyzes the data from that source as well. For example, if the IoT device gathers data about home care customers' vitals, for example, or if you are familiar with these emergency watches, for example, from Tunstall, which might be the most known emergency phone provider in the Nordic countries. And when this data comes in to our AI platform has multiple different pre-trained AI models. And as an example, one model can only, for example, focus customers' risk of dehydration. So it tries to find nodes where it finds symptoms of dehydration, such as vomiting or stomach problems or dark urine, for example. And from this information, it provides this alert of customers' health or well-being deviation that it finds. And our AI analyzes this data in daily basis. So you are able to get kind of like automatic care assessment of the home care customer each day. And every time that our AI finds that there is something happening in the customer's health, it provides this alert. But if there is no changes in the customer's health, it doesn't give any alerts, because we do not want to pop up alerts for our customers if they are not intended to lead to any actions. So all the alerts that we provide require some sort of action from our customer organization. I wanted to tell you a little bit about these benefits of our so-called virtual caregiver. We use the term virtual caregiver of our solution since you can think our solution as an employee that looks the home care customers' health-related information every day and looks to the past and sees if there's any changes, and if there is, this virtual caregiver raises the hand and says that, hey, we should look into this problem with this specific customer. What we have been able to do, we have been able to extend the period of time that the customer lives at home. So, for example, one of our AI models is looking for home care customers' risk to end up in a nursing home or a nursing facility, and it provides the user information how this risk has come up, so the home care employee is able to act upon this information and therefore see if they are able to do something to keep the home care customer longer at home, since mostly people want to live at home instead of these nursing facilities. And also in a country like Finland, it's also cheaper to a certain point to keep customer at home instead of putting the customer in a 24/7 care. Also, since we analyzed the customer's well-being and health, we are able to provide optimizing information for our customer organizations. For example, which customers are receiving more care than necessary and which customers would need more attention at this point of time. And for example, when a home care customer is on a recovery phase, they might have more home care visits. And with our customer, I had a discussion last week with one of our customers. She told me that they were able to catch quite a lot of customers who had come to a rehabilitation, and therefore they received more care, and it was supposed to be a certain period of time, but for some reason it didn't stop, and our AI was able to show that this customer is currently receiving more care than the customers who are in a similar cognitive and physical condition, and therefore they were able to decrease the amount of care. But also our solution helps with other optimization factors as well, such as which customers are receiving care during the biggest traffic spikes. But I can talk a little bit more about that in a slide after this. Some other things that we have been able to do is that we have been able to reduce these ambulance or hospital visits, and by reducing hospital visits there is less ambulance rally going on. So from statistical point of view, our AI has been able to detect home care customers which are going to end up in a hospital in the next 5 days with accuracy of 52%. So if we are able to know half of the customers before they end up in a hospital, during that 5 days period, we are able to prevent it. Since after these hospital visits, the customer usually requires more help when they get back home. And also the customer's quality of life decreases when they have to leave home to a new environment where they are unsure what's going to happen next. Some of these hospital visits can be avoided, and some of them are inevitable. Also, we have been able to increase the satisfaction to the service chain with the seniors and family members when we are providing this extra layer of safety by analyzing the customer's well-being in daily basis and providing the support for the caregivers. Since the time is limited, I'm going to go through quickly the statistics. So we have been able to reduce these unnecessary home care visits during rush hours. And this data is from one of our customer organizations, and they wanted to see if there is customers that could be taken care of outside of these traffic hours. And they had quite a lot of visits that we were able to optimize. So there was almost 10% of these unnecessary home care visits on rush hour or otherwise unnecessary home care visits. And we were able to get it from almost 10% to below 2%. And that resource went to other tasks, obviously, but they were able to free their resources for other tasks with our help. Also, here is some statistic of from one of our customer. So we are also informing if we find customers that are frequently in pain at home, and we were able to decrease the amount of home care customers having frequent pain sessions at home with our solution in the 6 months period here, as you can see. And this is my last slide here today. So here is some of our reference customers here in Finland. These so-called sote-alueet, so hospital districts and municipalities that are under one umbrella are usually our customers, and we are analyzing their home care customers. And currently here in Finland, a little less than 50% of the municipalities are currently using our solution, and next year it's going to be above 50%. And we have these bigger customers, but just to show, we also have these smaller cities as our customers here in Finland. We are operating outside of Finland as well, and our AI understands Swedish, Danish, and English languages. And the accuracy of our NLP with these foreign languages is 95%, while the accuracy in Finnish language is 96%. And there is a really small change to be made after we are able to get it to 96% in other languages as well. And that was my presentation for today, and I can see that there is some questions in the chat, but I'm not quite sure how you would like to proceed next, since you are the organizers.
Yes, we would like to hear your answer about those questions. Very good question from Stephen and Riikka. Please continue.
Yeah, so Stephen, there's a, is your AI platform IoT device agnostic? Is there an open API for device suppliers to integrate with your platform? Yes, there is. We provide an open APIs, which can be found from our web page. And we have built the first ones when we started, but nowadays we support almost all of the IoT devices here in Finland, and some IoT devices used in international waters as well. But currently we are getting these connections that, hey, can we connect our device to your solution? Our customer is asking to you, to our IoT device to be connected to your platform. So yeah, therefore we have open APIs for that. Mm-hmm. And the next question, how does your platform receive pain data from the person under care? So this comes from the free text notes. When the nurse or home care employee is visiting the customer and is writing down, for example, that we were having a lunch together and the customer was complaining about toothache, for example. So that's an indicator of pain. Okay. And if there's other indicators of pain, for example, back pain or something else, our AI takes it into consideration, and it doesn't give an alert if the customer occasionally has a headache, for example. But if it's constant, then if it's frequent, then our AI starts to pop up the information that, hey, now we should intervene, or at least check if we are able to do something about it.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that answered
good. Yeah, that's great.
Your question. Thanks. And Riikka Räsänen, how much does regional dialects affect the understanding of the AI? Riikka, this is great question. So yeah, our AI understands the dialects as well. This was a challenge at first, but since we have received a lot of education material, we have been able to teach our AI with the dialects as well. I'm going to give a really easy example. So this can be connected to the dialects as well. So for example, here in Finland, when I take a painkiller, I'm just going to say that I took some Burana. And Burana is basically a painkiller in Finnish language, since it's a brand. And this is also a similar thing in other countries, that they have these own terms for painkiller. And when we start using our AI solution, there can be some small adjustments that we need to make when we receive the first sets of data, and usually there isn't much to educate or parameter with our AI. And that's my answers to these questions. I hope it was enough.
May I ask one more question, if it's okay?
Yeah, definitely.
I was just wondering, do you have a kind of Alexa app that asks somebody about how they feel today and takes them through steps?
No, we do not have this kind of information that we would gather. I suppose that if there would be some sort of device that, for example, Alex, that would ask the customer how you are feeling, and when the customer answers, it would record the information. We would be able to analyze the recording if it would be in a text format.
Yes.
And probably use that, but we do not have such a function at the moment.
Okay.
But we do use. We are currently working with HUS, Central Hospital of Helsinki. I suppose that's the correct name, and they use these forms when they are asking their home dialysis customers how they are feeling and how they are thinking about their own health. And that is something that we use when we monitor home dialysis customers and their health. So we also work in that field. We analyze the customer's blood pressure and weight before the home dialysis and afterwards. And if we find that there is a really high risk of is it a mortalization? We pop up an information that you should get to the hospital ASAP. And also we get that information to the hospital if necessary, since it's also helpful for these home dialysis customers that they are able to live a little bit more normal life when they do not have to go to the hospital for these dialysis operations.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Samuel. And
thank you, Timo.
Thank you, Stephen and Anders. Is there any more questions to Samuel, Stephen, or Anders? I think this has been excellent 1 hour and a half to hear something about disruptive technologies in healthcare, social and healthcare area. And I noticed that that in our schedule there was last point was something like cooperation, future cooperation and steps. And I noticed that at least in our University of Applied Sciences, my colleague Elina and Anders in Umeå, they have something cooperation ideas already there in our chat. And I hope that also you, Samuel and Stephen, will have some contacts from our webinar.
Look forward to that.
I think according to schedule, it's time to Time to again thank you all. Thank you for your presentations and all you for your active participation. Very many good questions. And we all remind you that our distinct Thursday events continue next year. Our third one is 25th of January at the same time, 1 o'clock and at Central Europe time at 2 o'clock in Finnish time. And I hope you will join us then. Now, for my part, have a nice week and maybe quite soon, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.